I remember the night I realized my marriage was already over, even though we were still living in the same house. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that does not feel peaceful. It feels heavy, like something is missing, but you cannot name it. I was standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The clock on the wall was ticking loudly. Every second felt longer than the last. He was in the living room, sitting in his chair, watching television. We were only a few steps away from each other, but it felt like we were living in two different worlds. That was the moment it hit me. Not with anger, not with tears, just a slow, painful understanding. We were no longer a couple. We were just two people sharing a house for the sake of our children. And the strange part is, it did not happen all at once. It happened slowly. So slowly that I did not even notice when love started fading. When I first married him, everything felt simple. We did not have much money, but we had dreams. Small dreams. A cozy home, a happy family, laughter around the dinner table. He used to look at me like I was important, and I believed him. The early years were full of little things that mattered. He would bring me coffee in the morning. We would sit together in the evening and talk about our day. Even silence felt warm back then. Then life happened. Work became stressful. Bills started piling up. Children came into our lives, and everything changed. Not in a bad way, just in a busy way. I became a mother first, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being a wife. He became a provider, and slowly stopped being a partner. At first, I told myself, this is normal. Everyone says marriage changes after children. Everyone says love becomes quieter, but no one tells you it can also disappear. Our conversations became shorter. Then they became practical. Did you pay the bill? Did you pick up the kids? What is for dinner? That was it. No more, how are you feeling? No more, I missed you today. Just routine, just responsibility, just survival. I did not complain. I thought being a good wife meant staying strong. I thought being a good mother meant protecting the home, no matter what it cost me. And my children, they were everything to me. I remember their small hands holding mine, their laughter filling the house, their little voices calling, "Mom." How could I break that? How could I take away their sense of security? So I stayed, even when the distance between us grew, even when nights became colder, even though we slept in the same bed. Sometimes he would come home late. He would eat quietly. I would watch him, hoping he would say something, anything, but he never did. And I stopped asking. Because asking and getting silence hurts more than not asking at all. There were moments, small moments, when I thought maybe things would change. Like on anniversaries. I would hope he would remember. Sometimes he did, sometimes he forgot. But even when he remembered, it felt like an obligation, not love. A quick happy anniversary. No warmth, no effort, just words. And I would smile, pretending it was enough, because I did not want my children to see the truth. I became very good at pretending, smiling during dinner, laughing at the right moments, acting like everything was fine. Maybe you have felt this too, when you are surrounded by people, but still feel completely alone. That is a different kind of loneliness, a quiet one, a heavy one, the kind that sits in your chest and never leaves. I started finding comfort in small things, watching my children play, listening to music while doing chores, sitting alone with my thoughts late at night. Those moments became my escape, because talking to him no longer felt safe. Not because he was cruel, but because he was absent, emotionally, completely gone. There was no fight, no big argument, no dramatic ending, just distance. Slow, silent distance. And somehow that hurts more, because at least anger means something is still alive. But silence means it is already gone. One evening, my daughter asked me something that stayed with me. She said, "Mom, why do you and Dad not talk much?" I froze. I smiled and said, "We are just tired, sweetheart." But inside, I felt something break. Children see more than we think. They feel things we try to hide. That night, I sat alone in the dark, and I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. Am I staying for them, or am I hiding from the truth? The answer scared me, because deep down, I knew I was afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of being alone, afraid of what people would say. So I convinced myself I was staying for my children, but maybe it was also for me, because staying felt easier than leaving, even if it meant losing myself, slowly. Days turned into years. Years passed quietly. We continued living like this. 2 people, 1 house, no connection, just responsibility. And one night, everything felt different again. Not louder, not dramatic, just clear. I looked at him across the room, and for the first time, I did not feel sadness. I felt emptiness. And that scared me more than anything else. Because sadness means you still care. But emptiness, that means something inside you has already given up. And that was the moment I started to wonder, what example was I really giving my children? The question stayed in my mind long after that night. It did not go away. It followed me in the kitchen, in the laundry room, even when I was sitting with my children, helping them with their homework. What example am I giving them? At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself, they have both parents, that is enough. But deep inside, I knew that was not true. Because children do not just need parents. They need to see love. They need to feel warmth. They need to grow up believing that marriage is more than silence. And our home had become too quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. The way we never sat together anymore. The way we stopped eating as a family unless I forced it. The way he barely looked at me when he spoke. And the way I had stopped expecting anything from him. That realization hurt the most. Not his distance, but my acceptance of it. I had adjusted to a life without love, like it was normal, like it was enough. One evening, my son came home from school and went straight to his room. He did not even say hello. That was not like him. I followed him quietly. He was sitting on his bed, staring at the floor. I asked, "Is everything okay?" He shrugged and said, "Yeah." But I knew that yeah. It was the same kind of yeah his father used. Short, empty, closed. I sat next to him and gently asked again. This time he looked at me and said something that shook me. "Do you and Dad even like each other?" For a moment, I could not breathe. I forced a small smile and said, "Of course we do." But my voice felt weak, even to me. He did not argue, he just nodded, and that silence between us said everything. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about his question. Children learn love by watching it. And what were they watching? 2 people living together without connection, without kindness, without affection. Was I teaching them that this is what marriage looks like? That this is what they should accept in their own lives someday? That thought broke something inside me. For years, I believed I was protecting them by staying. But what if I was hurting them without realizing it? The next few days felt different. Not outside. Everything looked the same. Same house, same routine, same silence. But inside me, something had shifted. I started seeing things clearly, like I had been asleep for years and was finally waking up. I noticed how tired I felt, not physically, but emotionally, the kind of tiredness that does not go away with rest. I had spent so many years holding everything together, making sure the children were happy, making sure the house was running, making sure nothing broke, at least on the surface. But no one was taking care of me, not even myself. I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, to be heard, to matter, as a person, not just as a mother. Maybe you have felt this too, when you give so much of yourself that one day you realize there is nothing left. I started asking myself small questions, simple ones. What do I want? What do I feel? What do I need? And the hardest part was, I did not have answers, because I had not asked myself those questions in years. One afternoon, I was cleaning an old drawer when I found a small photo. It was from our early days. We were sitting close together, smiling, real smiles. I stared at that picture for a long time, trying to remember how that felt, trying to understand where it all went wrong. Was it time? Was it neglect? Or was it just life slowly pulling us apart? I walked into the living room and looked at him. He was in the same chair, same position, same distance. And for the first time, I did not feel hope. I felt clarity. This was not going to change. Not because it could not, but because neither of us was trying anymore. And a marriage without effort cannot survive. That evening, I did something small but important. I sat next to him. It felt strange, unfamiliar, like sitting next to a stranger. I said, "Can we talk?" He looked surprised, then he nodded. But even in that moment, I could feel the distance. I asked him, "Are you happy?" He paused, looked away, and said, "I do not know." That answer was honest and painful. I nodded slowly. Then I asked, "Do you think we are okay?" He sighed, a long, tired sigh, and said, "We are managing." Managing. That word stayed with me. We were not living. We were not loving. We were just managing. Like two people carrying a weight without ever putting it down. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But instead, I stayed calm. Because deep inside, I already knew the truth. This was not a marriage anymore. This was an arrangement, built on routine, held together by children and fear. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, but also with a strange sense of peace. Because for the first time in years, I was not pretending. I was not hiding from the truth. I was facing it. And sometimes, facing the truth is the first step toward change, even if that change is painful, even if it breaks everything you have known for years. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was quiet. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the sunlight slowly fill the room. And I asked myself one final question. If nothing changes, can I live like this for the rest of my life? I sat there for a long time, thinking, feeling, remembering. And somewhere, deep inside, I felt the answer rising, slowly, clearly, and it terrified me. The answer did not come as words at first. It came as a feeling, a quiet, steady feeling in my chest. And the more I sat with it, the clearer it became. No, I could not live like this for the rest of my life. Not like this. Not in this silence. Not in this emptiness. That realization did not make me feel strong. It made me feel scared. Because once you accept the truth, you cannot go back to pretending. For years, I had built my life around endurance. Just get through the day. Just keep the peace. Just stay for the children. But now, that voice inside me was changing. It was no longer asking me to endure. It was asking me to choose. And I did not know how to do that. Choosing meant risk. Choosing meant change. Choosing meant facing things I had avoided for years. So for a few days, I said nothing. I moved through the house like always, cooked meals, cleaned rooms, smiled when needed. But inside, I was different. I was watching everything more closely, noticing every silence, every distance, every moment that felt empty. And once you start seeing clearly, you cannot unsee it. One evening, we were all sitting at the dinner table. The children were talking about their day, laughing, sharing stories, and for a moment, it felt normal, almost like the family I had always wanted. But then I looked at him. He was quiet, nodding occasionally, but not really present, and I realized something painful. We were not a family together. We were a family around him. That night, after the children went to bed, I stayed in the kitchen longer than usual. I knew I could not keep avoiding this, so I walked into the living room. He was there, like always. I sat down across from him. My hands felt cold. My heart was beating fast, but my voice was calm. I said, "We cannot keep living like this." He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. And for a moment, I saw something in his eyes. Not anger, not surprise, just tiredness. He did not argue. He did not deny it. He simply asked, "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath and said the words I had been holding inside for so long. "I feel alone, even when you are here." The room became very quiet. He looked down, then back at me, and said, "I feel the same." That moment was both painful and relieving, because finally the truth was out. We were both feeling it. We were both living in the same silence, but neither of us had the courage to say it, until now. I asked him, "When did this happen?" He shook his head slowly. "I do not know. It just did." That answer felt real. Because sometimes there is no big reason, no single moment, just small distances building over time. I asked him another question. "Do you want to fix this?" He hesitated, not long, but long enough. And that hesitation told me everything. He said, "I do not know how." And maybe that was the truth. Maybe we both forgot how to love each other, how to talk, how to connect. Years of silence had created a wall between us, and neither of us knew how to break it. We sat there for a long time, talking more than we had in years. Not arguing, not blaming, just speaking honestly. And sometimes honesty hurts more than anger, because it leaves no room for illusion. At one point, he said something that stayed with me. I thought staying was enough. I closed my eyes for a moment, because I had believed the same thing, that staying meant commitment, that staying meant love. But now I understood. Staying without connection is not love. It is just presence, and presence alone is not enough. I asked him softly, "Are we staying for the children, or because we are afraid?" He did not answer right away, but his silence was an answer. We were afraid. Afraid of breaking the family, afraid of starting over, afraid of being alone. But fear had kept us stuck, not happy, not fulfilled, just stuck. That night felt different, not lighter, but clearer, like a fog had lifted and we could finally see where we stood. Before going to bed, he said, "What do we do now?" I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I spoke without pretending. "I do not know, but we cannot go back to how things were." He nodded slowly, and for once, there was no distance in that moment, just two people standing at a crossroads. The next few days were quiet again, but this time, the silence felt different. It was not empty, it was uncertain. We were both thinking, both feeling, both trying to understand what comes next. I started noticing small changes. He tried to talk more, asked simple questions, sat at the table a little longer. And I tried too, but something inside me had already shifted. The emotional distance of years does not disappear in days. An effort after silence feels unfamiliar, sometimes even uncomfortable. Still, I appreciated that he was trying. But I also knew something important. Trying is a beginning, not a solution. Maybe you've been here too, at that place where you're not completely broken, but not whole either, where you're deciding whether to rebuild or let go. Both choices are hard, both require courage, and both come with pain. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself, really looking, and I asked a question I had avoided my whole life. If I stay, will I ever feel loved again? Tears filled my eyes, because this time, I knew the answer. I woke up that morning with a heaviness I had carried for years. It was not just the usual fatigue, it was the weight of realizing how much of myself I had given away, piece by piece, quietly, silently, to keep a marriage alive that had long since ceased to exist. I looked in the mirror and saw the reflection of someone who had endured, sacrificed, and survived, but also someone who had almost disappeared. The woman staring back at me was familiar, yet distant. She had been strong for everyone else, for my children, for my family, for appearances. But now I realized she had forgotten how to be strong for herself. I walked into the kitchen and sat at the small wooden table by the window. Morning sunlight poured through the glass, but it felt cold rather than warm. I held a cup of tea, but I barely drank it. My thoughts wandered to him, my husband, my partner, the man I had loved once. I thought of the life we had created together and the life we had lost along the way. I thought of the children, their laughter, their innocence, and how much they deserved to see love in its truest form, not just a shadow of it. For so many years I had stayed. I stayed for the children, for the family, for what I thought was duty. I stayed out of fear of being alone, fear of judgment, fear of disrupting the life we had built. I stayed because it seemed easier than facing the truth. But now, in the quiet of that morning, I knew the truth. I could not keep living like this. Staying without love, staying without connection, staying just to maintain appearances. This was not life. This was survival. And survival is not enough. Not for me, not for anyone. I remembered the small moments that had defined the last decade of our marriage. The quiet dinners where we barely spoke, the nights lying side by side without touching, the conversations reduced to logistics and bills. I remembered the anniversaries where a perfunctory, "Happy anniversary," replaced the warmth and affection we once shared. And I remembered the children, innocent and unaware, watching the silence between us, learning what marriage could look like without love. I could not let that continue. That afternoon, after tucking the children into bed, I approached him. I walked into the living room, feeling the familiar tension, the distance, the years of unspoken words hovering in the air. He was sitting in his chair, reading something on his phone, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I sat down across from him, trying to steady my voice. "We cannot keep living like this," I said softly. He looked up, startled, and for a moment there was nothing but stillness. Then he nodded, almost reluctantly. "What do you mean?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I mean, we are not happy. We are not in love. We are not connected. We are teaching the children the wrong lesson about life and love. And I cannot keep pretending anymore." He was quiet for a long time. I could see the surprise in his eyes, but also a flicker of understanding. Then he said the words I had secretly longed to hear for years. "I know. I have felt it too. I just did not know how to say it." The truth hung between us like fragile glass. Years of silence, of unspoken fears and unmet needs, suddenly had a voice. And in that voice, there was both pain and relief. Because finally, we were honest. Finally, we were both acknowledging what we had avoided for far too long. I asked him, gently, "Do you want to try to fix this?" He hesitated, and his hesitation spoke volumes. "I do not know how," he admitted. And perhaps that was the most honest answer of all. We had both forgotten how to connect, how to nurture love, how to truly be present. Years of routine, of silence, of habit had built walls neither of us knew how to tear down. We sat together that night, speaking quietly, honestly, not arguing, not blaming, just speaking truths we had kept buried for too long. He told me about the fear he had felt, fear of change, fear of failing, fear of hurting the children. I told him about my own fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of the unknown. And in that moment, I realized something profound. We had both been paralyzed by fear, not by lack of love. The next days were not dramatic. There were no sudden bursts of emotion, no tears flowing endlessly, no shouting matches. There was, however, clarity, a clear understanding that we could not go back to the way things were. We were at a crossroads, and both of us had to make choices. Not easy ones, but necessary ones. I began to plan quietly, thoughtfully. I would remain the mother, protector, and guide for our children. I would maintain stability for them. But I would also claim my life back. I would no longer sacrifice my well-being in the name of duty. I would live truthfully, even if that meant stepping into the unknown. My children learned from my choices, not just the ones I made while married, but also the ones I made when I chose to be true to myself. They learned that love is not a silent sacrifice. They learned that honesty matters, even when it is uncomfortable. And they learned that courage is sometimes quiet, sometimes slow, and sometimes invisible, but always powerful. Looking back, I see now that staying had taught me a lot, but leaving, living honestly, taught me more. It taught me that life is fragile and love is precious. It taught me that children do not just need parents, they need examples. They need to see courage, resilience, and truth in action. And above all, I learned that it is possible to love, to be present, and to live fully, even after years of silence. Maybe you have felt this too, the weight of duty, the fear of change, the quiet realization that staying is not always love. I want you to know that it is okay to face that truth. It is okay to step into uncertainty. It is okay to choose yourself. Because in the end, living truthfully is the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to your children. This is the story of staying, of enduring, of realizing the truth, and finally, of reclaiming life. A life that is honest, brave, and full of love. Not perfect, not easy, but truly lived.